meeting. Do I have a motion for adoption of the minutes? Kirsty, second. Michael, you were the only one there. So,
Okay.
Michael,
I'll
sorry,
second
David.
that.
David, you were there too. Can you second and make motions, David?
I don't know. I can't vote, but who knows? I can probably second things.
Okay.
No, yes.
I can? Okay, all right, I won't.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, I just didn't mean to be kind of passing you over there, you know, when you so desperately wanted to second that.
Right.
I see that we have no public joining us tonight, so let's move right on to item 4, which is the council referral of 815 Smith Road. And Daniel, you want to give us a little background? I have some questions. Maybe can I ask one question before you begin?
Yeah.
This is a rezoning application.
Yes.
Is there a specified zone that they're rezoning to, or are they getting their own zone built for them?
Yeah, so they would likely have a zone variation.
So they'd be RR3Z.
Yeah, probably. I think
something.
F maybe we're up to.
Okay, we're not that far
Yeah.
along. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, that'd be great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a rezoning application for 815 Smith Road. All right. So this went to council in November of last year, and council at that point referred the application to the APC, and they also directed staff to discuss an amenity contribution with the applicant, and I can update that later in the presentation. But so this is a property located on Smith Road at the junction with Fernie Road. So it's off of Woods Road if you go Mount Gardner Road, sort of on the north side of Bowen Island. There's just its orthophoto sighting. And it's zoned RR3, so rural residential 3. The zone permits detached dwelling, number of accessory uses, including the accessory residential use, and that has a maximum floor area permitted of 115 square meters for that detached secondary suite, that's about 1,250 square feet, give or take. And it has setbacks of 7.5 meters from all lot lines and 4.6 from highways, which means from any roads. So the application in brief would be a rezoning to increase the floor area permitted for a detached secondary suite to 132 square meters for an existing detached secondary suite, and to reduce the setbacks from the lot lines for that detached secondary suite. So by way of background, there was a cabin prior to construction of the main house on the property. So this is a photo taken sometime prior to 2012 with this small cabin in the foreground and the main house in the background. I believe the staff report to council contains sort of some more details on the timeline of when these took place, but this is from prior to 2012. The applicant essentially completely rebuilt the cabin at some point without the necessary permits. So this is what that cabin or the detached secondary suite looks like now. Staff in the municipality became aware of this some point in 2016 and notified the applicant of their need to obtain necessary permits for the cabin or for the detached secondary suite. And the applicant at that point applied for a variance permit to council, which came to council in 2017, and council at that point moved to not consider the DVP for the variances requested. And so applicant and staff have spent several years talking about the various options of how to proceed. And the applicant ultimately determined to apply for a rezoning application to rezone the property to permit the detached secondary suite. And just other considerations. So the report notes that if the rezoning goes ahead, that there's a list of things that the applicant will have to do in order to gain a building permit and then ultimately an occupancy permit for the detached secondary suite. So things like notifying code compliance and doing the necessary septic work and the HBO, so the home warranty and things like that. And the applicant, after the November council meeting, has started that process of obtaining the necessary information. And then the other thing noted in the report that went to council in November is this idea of amenity contribution and what would be an appropriate amenity contribution as part of the rezoning application. And after that meeting, the applicant has submitted a letter where they've offered an amenity contribution of $50,000 as part of the rezoning. So that's in essence the background, but then I just have a recommendation for comments for council. Stop sharing now. And then I will say too, just given the timing of everything, we've placed the this rezoning application on council's agenda for the meeting on the 24th, so on Monday. So I've submitted the report that I sent you the link to earlier this week, with essentially a placeholder for the APC meeting. But knowing that depending how the meeting is tonight, if the APC isn't comfortable and wants more information, that we would then be pulling it from the agenda and postponing, but just trying to keep our applications moving wherever possible. So that's the background, and then open for any questions or comments.
So this has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
And the initial attempt at compliance was through a variance.
Yeah.
And that was not pursued by council because?
I mean, that was prior to David Hawking being a counselor, so I don't know if he can't speak directly to it. I mean, I guess, you could look at the video. I know there was great discussion among council about like whether they were willing to be seen as sort of just approving something after the fact or not.
Right.
But weighing that with like, well, ultimately, did council want to, not issue a variance, not proceed more, and instead move to like removal of non-compliance? And
so it wasn't because you can't vary density and this cottage is over area?
No, you could do it. You could do the variance. Yeah, you could do it as a variance. You could increase floor area. You can reduce setbacks. It's not an increase in density.
And so why are they not pursuing that approach now?
I mean, ultimately, I think it's from their end discomfort and potentially, I don't want to speak for them, but potentially, their legal advice in terms of providing an amenity contribution as part of a variance application. And so we're more comfortable doing that as part of a rezoning application.
Can I just ask, if they hadn't done this backwards and built and then asked, would we have a problem with it?
I mean, I guess it's larger and it's in the setback.
But it's not really like, it's not being awful to their neighbors or causing any problems. There's water, there's septic, like it's not, it's just a,
I think some of those things
I
are
would call it a
not known.
technicality as opposed to an egregious,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could say like, nobody complained about it when construction was underway. The time it was sort of rebuilt, the zone would not have permitted the second dwelling on the property and wouldn't have permitted it at all, would have said you need a rezoning and an OCP change. And it's only after we brought in the detached secondary suite bylaw, there's sort of a cleaner avenue to allow it. But in essence, the municipality found out about it because BC Assessment notified us rather than like a neighbor complaining that now it's, overlooking your backyard or whatever.
Who is the, I have 10 questions, but Drew's asked 3 of them already. That was one of my questions. Is the neighbor actually a road?
Yeah.
For this particular, and it's, yeah. So, and then presumably there's a neighbor across the road. Okay. My next question is the tough one. If none of this happens, is the municipality's only alternative to order demolition?
I mean, ultimately, it's like, path to compliance is have the zoning fit to get a building permit, or it would be, moving and reducing in size the dwelling.
Yeah, okay, so that's, but that clearly is the nuclear option that
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants. When the cabin was built initially, were any permissions at all required for it? The one that they remodeled?
Yeah, like when it was originally, like I think it's the original dwelling
Okay,
on the property.
Renovation, Michael, to answer your question about that, which happened in 2013, a building permit would have been required. That was a very extensive renovation.
yeah, no, but I'm just getting to the footprint, if you like, of the cabin. It would have been acceptable because there was no, none of these setback requirements. So yeah, I guess Drew asked the question already. I'm still quite not understanding what the difference between the application in 2017 and 2021 is now in substance. I know now they're looking for a zoning difference rather than a developmental one. They have a different council. They apparently still have the one councillor who supported them, I notice. But is there really a substantive difference, Daniel?
In terms of end goal, you know, in terms of like the goal, their goal has been to bring the dwelling into compliance, and yeah, so that hasn't changed. It's like a way to permit the existing dwelling rather than them looking to do anything extra on top of that.
Okay, here's a tough one. If they do pay the $50,000, which I see is identified as voluntary, new meaning for the word voluntary, I think. But in any event, if they do pay the $50,000, but there turns out to be some impediment to getting a building permit and the rest of that, have they just lost the money?
Yeah, I mean, that's why staff recommend that sort of between first and second reading, so before it goes to public hearing, we receive the information that we would be looking for in a building permit application.
Okay.
So things like a code compliance report and whatever else, so that we can clearly say, okay, yeah, building permit.
So that they'd have some comfort that if they paid the
Yeah.
50 grand, it would be more or less buying the
Yeah.
compliance.
Because we've done it with other ones, like where, you know, there's an existing thing, and I think there was a variance request once, and we had them as part of it do an engineering report, which said essentially like, well, you have to tear down half of the building.
Okay.
So at that point said, well, we're not going to consider a variance if you just have to rebuild.
Okay.
You can't get a building permit. So we won't proceed.
Yeah. Okay. And here's the toughest one of all. I'm going to send you out island-wide with your tape measure. Do you have any sense of whether or not we have a whole bunch of buildings that are non-compliant, either because of history or laziness or incompetent builders? Or the guy built it himself, didn't he? Right? The owner.
I don't know.
Because that puzzled me when I read it. I mean, I remember when we were building, our builder had the surveyor out here 2 or 3 times to make sure, before he put the footings in, and then when he did, and just to make sure everything was all right, because I think he knew he'd be on the hook. But anyway,
we don't actively, I guess, seek out things,
yeah.
But I mean, it's relatively rare, I would say, for a dwelling to have been built within the last decade without permits.
Okay,
it's like people put up like accessory buildings, but when you're actually building a dwelling, it's less often.
Okay, because my overriding concern is creating a precedent here that can jump up and bite us in the future. But if you said there had been previous zoning variances, what sort of things were they? Like,
what do you mean?
Well, you talked about we're up to F.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it must be A, B,
some of
C,
them
D,
are,
E.
Like I was just doing a review of another one that's A. So a few of them were sort of right off the bat when the land use bylaw was adopted in 2002, and it was essentially an attempt to like deal with all the strange circumstances that are on Bowen. So that's what sort of the initial round of them were of zone variations, is like, okay, this one can have multiple dwellings on its property because they're sort of historic dwellings on it.
Okay.
More often they relate to like subdivision requirements. So a bunch of them are like, the average lot size doesn't apply so that somebody can subdivide.
But this building does comply with the new bylaw, except for it's about 10% too large and forgot the numbers now, but about 3 meters closer than it should be, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still don't really understand why it has to be rezoned and why a variance can't be given. Because if the house burns down, don't you want it to be moved further away?
Maybe
Like
that's what.
if it's rezoned, then that gives it the legality of permanent
Yeah.
position.
Huh.
Again, I just, like, a variance seems to me to be something that, and is that just because you can't ask for 50 grand if it's a variance?
Yeah, Kirsty, that's an interesting insight because it's the claimant who decided to ask for the rezoning, according to, and I wonder if that's exactly why, is when they have the rezoning, if they do want to renovate, if the building burns down or they do want to reconstruct, then they have that. I wonder
were
if we
they
shouldn't
just
add that as
told?
a condition.
Or were they just told that they should get a rezoning? Like, you never know. They may have been, somebody on council may have, or in planning might have suggested to them that rezoning's better.
But I think your comment gives rise to what I think would be a good condition if we support this. Maybe the condition should be that it's for that particular building, and in the event that that building is destroyed or replaced, and I don't know if that's even possible from a planning point of view, Daniel, but.
Yeah, I'm going to think about how we would do that. Yeah.
Can I ask a sort of question that would be sort of at the beginning of a series of questions?
Sure.
Dan, you said that the applicants have come forward because they have a wish to bring their development into compliance. And I'm curious about why. Like, why did that suddenly arise? Did they discover they couldn't get insurance? Or did they discover that they have a problem when they sell, that they have to disclose that it was built without permits? Or what's
that would be it.
It's like the process, I think, started back in 2016, probably, when we contacted them. So like the municipality initiated that, okay, there's a dwelling here without permits that needs to get permits. But since that initial contact, it's like the applicant has been willing to work with the municipality to find a way to come into compliance. So I'd say, in contrast to other times where we've found things have been built without permits, and the owner has no desire or intention to like rectify anything, and it's quite.
Yeah, there's that place on Eagle Cliff Road that must drive you crazy. They just don't care. The guy with the pond. The pond that is a swimming pool. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Drew, from a legal point of view, if I were solicitor for the purchaser, I would never let my clients buy a non-compliant property without some kind of serious indemnity.
Right.
And I think that, and they may not be planning on selling it, but they're almost certainly not planning on living forever. So you don't want to leave this problem with your executor.
There's an inherent liability issue too, from an insurance perspective, Michael.
Yeah, I don't know how insurance would make a difference, because it's not like it's built on unstable ground or anyway. But
if there were this hypothetical fire, and they could demonstrate that the wiring was done by the same person that wired our place, which I fixed when we renovated it with a permit, and we found 5 live wires in the walls that were not properly terminated. That's the kind of thing that is really concerning. This whole notion of after the fact seeking permits, I find quite, I'll seek a word.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's quite discomforting. I don't think any of us are very happy about this.
Right.
At all, this disregard. I mean, what I thought was interesting is they were frank about the fact that they knew they needed a building permit. Back then, I have to wonder if they didn't apply for a building permit because they knew they wouldn't get it, because they were going to build it where they were darn well going to build it.
Well, even if they were going to build it there, Michael, at the time they built, they were not permitted to have a secondary suite.
Well, yeah, okay, there you go. So,
So they couldn't have built it at all.
which kind of answers the question. So I don't know. And Daniel, $50,000 is a lot of money for me. It is anyway. Is that, from the municipal point of view, is that a significant contribution or a significant enough contribution for what they're asking?
I mean, ultimately that's up to council, but you know, it is a significant contribution.
I'll just say what council said at the time. Council thought that was appropriate. I mean, they didn't talk about an exact number, but the feeling was substantial, and you know, the ranges were talked about, and where they are right now would be in line where council's thoughts were at the time, I would say.
Okay.
I didn't think it was nearly enough. I really sort of, but I feel that council is in a very difficult position here, where they are on the brink of approving an illegally constructed dwelling unit, and then they're being bought off for 50 grand for doing that.
Well, it's not as if it's $10,000 for each counselor or anything like that.
Well, no, but there's something, yeah, David. Michael,
Well, David's laughing. Maybe I.
There's a deeper truth here we weren't aware of.
Well, I know. I mean, that this, as a policy decision, I think the policy is pretty clear, and there's no doubt if we were a major metropolitan area, there would be a demolition order, right?
Yeah.
But
There's
we're
one
not a
of the
major metropolitan area, thank God.
I have a
No,
peripheral question. So this is a two-step process. We're, looking at a building permit that needs to be issued and an occupancy permit. I would presume this does not meet current building code. You mentioned a building code report, Daniel. Has that been provided, or?
No, they
Does
have
the building
engaged
department
someone
know?
to do it, and we've like the staff recommendation is to have that completed before any consideration of second reading,
Okay.
so that we can determine if we could be in a position to issue a building permit.
Yeah, because I think from my perspective, and I'm sure that Martin would back me up on this, trying to ascertain that a building is code compliant after it's built is just about impossible.
Oh yeah, holes in the drywall.
Big
to see
holes in the
wiring.
drywall.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plumbing, there's electrical, there's fire safety, potential fire safety issues. There's, there's all, and the current building code.
Energy
the
performance.
Energy performance on Bowen Island right now, we're looking at step 3 of the energy code. And this building, if they're asking for a building permit now, do they need to meet the building code requirements now? Because it's the 2018 code now, where when they built, they were probably under the 2012 code. And it's way different.
I believe the Building Code Act actually does require current code compliance to the date of the application
Yeah, I think so too.
for building permit.
I thought that was in the materials that they would have to meet the current standard for a development permit.
Do you know
For,
that, Daniel?
for building permit.
Couldn't I see that somewhere
Yeah.
out here?
Believe that's right, and just
they're
There
gonna have
won't
to
be.
tear it down anyway then. Road guys. Well, I don't know. It's, to me, it's, at least if they're trying to do the right thing, to me, it's let them roll. But I'm just not sure that rezoning is, in my mind, the right way. It's a variance. They screwed up. They're having a variance to keep it there, and rezoning a property gives, might upvalue it. A variance is just going to allow them to rock on. And
I think they need the rezoning. It's not just a matter of making it more valuable. They just simply couldn't sell it.
well, that's their problem.
Well, yeah.
Like really.
But
If they
what's
want-
going to happen though is if somebody does get an offer, or the owners die and there's an estate that has to be probated, the whole thing's going to land on council's lap again. And one of the things I think we should be recommending is deal with it now. You know what I mean?
So I think that Martin's questions are interesting. I feel less inclined and less supportive of any leniency toward these applicants until I have some sense of their ability to actually make the building compliant with the building code. If this application were coming forward to us with a report in hand from a registered professional saying this building meets the building code, the current building code, and should be issued a building permit, I would be feeling differently about it than I'm feeling right now, where I'm looking at it and I'm going, they've messed up at a number of levels, and they haven't come to us demonstrating enough will to, make it right. I'm sorry, Kirsty, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Okay, except that, there's a roadmap here, Drew. And as I understand it, I mean, this is going to be an interesting problem down the road, as I understand it, the variance is useless to them if the building's not up to 2018 code or the most recent code, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like if we just rezoned it, council said, yep, go ahead, went through all the process, and then we said, now you need to get a building permit, and then ultimately they couldn't get up to code and we couldn't issue a building permit.
Yeah, and it's too late to put a stop payment on the $50,000 check, presumably, too.
But the rezoning would stand, so then they could apply for a building permit for a new
Right.
structure.
Yeah.
Take this one down, and
So it wouldn't
So they-
necessarily end up on council's agenda again then.
They've gained something. They might even jack up their cottage and put it on wheels and pull it back where it should be and tear off some walls and bring it up to code.
But they wouldn't have to if it was rezoned with this weird thing.
well, they would for
Mhm.
code compliance.
Yeah, they would. They're two different things, Kirsty. There's the
Oh, I know,
zoning
they're two different things, but the code compliance, if they can't jack it up and move it on wheels if it doesn't comply to code. It's not gonna be because of, it's gonna be because of way more. So I'd probably, I don't know what they're,
Is that us? How can I put it? Doing for them what they should be doing for themselves if we recommend that they get the code compliance now before any of this proceeds any further. I mean, it's something they should have thought of themselves.
Yeah, and it's something they've initiated, like the last, I guess before Christmas when I last talked to the applicant, that they had started that process for the code compliance for the septic for the BC housing home warranty process.
If they ran into a road bump there, would they then have a different application to council, or would they just have to abandon it and rebuild in the proper location on the assumption that we don't, or the council doesn't give the zoning variance?
I think it probably, like, if, and this is sort of speculative, but if it's like, well, no, that the building can't come up to code, they won't be able to get a permit in its location, then I think it's kind of like the rationale for the rezoning
Disappears,
isn't
doesn't
there.
it?
Like,
Yeah.
if somebody else had come to say, we want this zoning change, we might say, well, no, you can probably just build your detached secondary suite, not in the setback and to the right,
Yeah.
the same size as everyone else.
Well,
Yeah,
they will surely be able to renovate it to code compliance.
Yes.
Although there is a bit of a proximity issue to the road, perhaps. I don't know how close it is.
3 meters.
Is it 3 meters to the road? So there may be some exposure issues there. That's a code issue.
If it's a wide enough road allowance, it'd probably be all right. But
Judging by the map and it's a very minor road. I don't know if that makes a difference, but
no, it doesn't. It's the code says it has. There's a component of the code that talks about exposing building face. It has to do with fire spread, and it says for a particular area of building face, only a percentage of that can be windows because they're unprotected. And as you move away from property lines, you can have more windows because you're further away from creating a problem for whatever is opposite that facade.
okay. Well,
So
yeah, you and Martin are the architects, and I'm just wondering, when Martin says, well, they could renovate and bring it up to code, I'm wondering if that's not going to be more expensive than just building this thing again in the right place.
Well, if it's a renovation, they
Plus you
don't
end up
have,
with a new building.
well, it's kind of an interesting, if it's a renovation, if the building inspector will accept that it's a renovation, they're not required to meet with step 3 of the energy code.
Oh, well, that could be a huge difference, right? Because that's all about materials and yeah.
There are other components they would have to come into compliance. You still must meet, you don't have to meet step 3, you have to meet step 1. And step 1 says you have to demonstrate that you have sufficient thermal capacity in your ceilings, roof, walls, floors, that you've got demonstrated assemblies that will meet certain criteria that are set out in the code, which is different from actually doing an energy model, a computer model of
Okay.
your building, which you need for step 3. So it's a bit different. So, even if they had to bump up the insulation, they could potentially strip off the siding and put some rigid insulation on the outside and, put cladding over that.
Wow.
There would be ways to achieve that. It's more difficult to know what's inside the walls with plumbing and electrical and so on. And that for me is where, potential hazards lurk.
Yeah, especially if the guy was a do-it-yourself builder. I'm just trying to get a sense of where we're at on this, but it really does
I
seem
think-
to me that we have to make sure that the zoning variation is worth the effort.
Yeah.
If you like, worth the effort on the claimant to apply for it and worth the effort of council to consider it and probably hold their noses a bit and vote for it. So I'm very concerned about whether or not they would get a building permit. They need to have those particular ducks in a row, seems to me, before.
Yes, I agree, Michael. And that's why I was bringing this up following from Martin's comments, because I feel like, yes, there is a roadmap. And I think the roadmap is a little bit, cart and the horse are a bit mixed up. I really feel like they need to demonstrate that, yes, they can get from coastal health a permit or approval of a septic system that will do all the buildings on the property, or maybe the 2 systems. They need to demonstrate that the building can be brought up to code in some reasonable way that they would, and then we could say, well, okay, so you've got a building that you could bring up to code. We could probably
Okay.
tweak
Well-
the zoning to get that,
Yeah.
that compliant.
Well, and here's my problem. I don't think it's our role to be giving the claimants advice, which is what we're really doing. But still, I think we can say from a municipal governance point of view that we think the application is premature because the purpose of the application is to authorize compliance. And there are other issues concerning compliance that must be resolved before the zoning variation application can be made. At the moment, the zoning variation application is a little bit moot, as we say in court. There's no, and I am concerned about the point that Kirsty made, or at least she raised about that they want a free pass for a new building, a new owner, forever, and it's a bit inappropriate to get that by just going ahead and, as you said, building an illegal building.
I actually don't really mind if they build an illegal building, but that's me.
Well, but they built one already. Do you want them to build another one though? That's really the issue for me. I'd like to, in a way, I'd like to help them with the one they built already if I could, but I don't want to give a blank authorization.
Yeah, I'd like to help them that, I don't know whether they did it on purpose or not, but if they're trying, then give them a path forward. And maybe it's not us to give them a path forward, but maybe it's the planning department to help them with a path forward, because it's pretty impossible for any individual to figure out what Bowen wants at this point in time.
You must be reading the undercurrent. But I, from a sort of, we're an advisory commission, and the advice I think we should give is that the application for the zoning variance is premature in the sense that it may become unnecessary, or you know, may become meaningless because the building doesn't otherwise comply.
Right.
Um,
I agree, Michael. And I think without giving them too much guidance, you know, that could be,
Well-
you could add to that compliance with health standards and building standards
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
And,
Well,
you know,
this is being recorded. There's a lot of good advice you and Martin are giving them.
Right.
And
we normally
Christian,
charge,
too.
normally
Oh,
charge.
yeah,
for
no,
that.
we're not allowed to do that.
No, I know.
Right.
Well, it's a frustrating situation, and let me say I do accept their good faith. They did come forward. Maybe they're paying the money with a little bit of prodding, but still they've offered it. I don't know.
Could I just raise a point that Daniel mentioned early on? He said that we would, that the next council, it was to give it first reading, but it would not proceed beyond that if they did not get a building permit. So does that not achieve what you're all asking?
Okay, so yeah, so the second reading would have to be delayed until then, but you'd have
Is
to make
that, is that what, Daniel, can you state again what you said, Daniel? Because I'm not sure if that's quite what he said.
Yeah, that was how I was envisioning the process. That essentially the first reading is showing sort of council's intention that, like, if you could get a building permit, you know, we're conceptually okay. We have a bylaw that we could proceed with, but not bringing it, not considering second reading, not going to a public hearing. You know, obviously not adopting the bylaw until it can be determined that they could get a building permit.
And the building permit would be a staff decision too, right?
Yeah.
You could just present it by way of report to council.
So it's not that council is, you know, necessarily like reviewing the information themselves, but they're looking for confirmation that, like, okay, if we proceed with the zoning, you know, everyone can be somewhat confident that then a building permit could be issued and an occupancy permit could
But
be.
I still think it would be very useful for us to record and communicate to council the concerns about making sure that the building is compliant, that before the rezoning is voted on, et cetera, and get all that on the record by way of a recommendation from this commission. Because, you know, after all, it's quite likely that the council that ultimately deals with that will be quite different from the one now.
Good point, Michael.
And we don't want it just to go to a second reading as, oh yeah, it's just second reading. Don't have to pay attention. I don't know. Certainly.
What would be the timing of the rezoning? Would it be at the same time as the occupancy permit?
No, we wouldn't be able to issue the building permit until the rezoning was complete.
And what about the occupancy permit? Is there anything additional?
Well, that's when it complies with code, essentially.
Yeah,
so after construction.
So it's
You
the
need
same
the
thing.
building permit to do the remedial work to get the occupancy permit. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, it's going back and forth between which is first and which is second.
Yeah, like how I would see it is, you know, assuming it's like we would get the reports done after first reading so that, you know, our building inspector could review and say, like, okay, I have enough here that I could issue a building permit. And then the zoning could proceed, be adopted, could issue a building permit, and then the work outlined in the reports could be, you know, take place to get occupancy permit.
But even that work would have to be completed, wouldn't it, before the zoning variance went?
No, like normally, like when we've done other sort of unpermitted buildings that otherwise meet zoning, it's like we would issue the building permit based on the registered professionals reports that it, you know, substantially complies, and it just needs, like, there's an outline of work and that they're going to oversee the rest of whatever work is necessary then to bring it into compliance.
And you
And
have
then
a
the
way
occupancy permit is issued when they can report that.
You have a way of enforcing that work be done?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I guess in essence, it's sort of the registered professional model, but it's like we'd have a building permit that's issued that's
But they won't
active.
get an occupancy permit
Yeah.
until it's all done anyway. So,
But they're occupying it already.
Right.
yeah, but as you said, if it's sold, it's an illegal building without an occupancy permit, or it's and that's not, so I think there's controls in place.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that the one danger that I think the municipality has to avoid is granting the rezoning that allows a different building, different owner, different time span, or rest of that. We're just dealing with the one building that these people happen to have built. And I think that's important.
Daniel, assuming a rezoning and not a variance, is there some kind of drawing that would be appended to that rezoning saying, this is the envelope within which we are approving the nonconformity of siting, or how does that work?
Yeah,
Or is it
doesn't look like
just,
there's a
or is it
survey.
just, sorry, Martin, what's that?
No, it just doesn't look like there's a survey here. I was about to ask that as well.
Uh-huh.
There's a sketch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like we don't typically do that. Like I would think the zone variation would be, R3F, then it's like a detached secondary suite can be 132 square meters, and the setback for a detached secondary suite can be reduced to whatever.
So
But potentially then it would be like, it might then be to do what you're asking. It's then a covenant on title that says like, we both agree to this, that the existing detached secondary suite can be here, but other buildings and structures need to be 7.5 meters from the lot line or something.
if there isn't something like that, the rezoning actually does give them latitude to site a new building anywhere on their property that's non-conforming. Site and build a non-conforming oversized secondary suite.
That's the problem.
And I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, well, that's why we need the survey, and we need to ensure that there are steps taken that it just, by the way, nobody seems to be concerned about the oversize. It's a very large parcel of land, relatively speaking, so.
Right. Well, I wondered, I had a question about that, whether, I assume that there are other accessory buildings on the property, and is the total lot coverage of the accessory buildings compliant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lot coverage and accessory building floor area and number of accessory buildings. Everything else is compliant.
Building heights and all of that, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
So
I'm
I've got sort of,
I'm still,
Right.
I have to say, unclear about why this is not a variance.
It's me too. I don't get it.
Where they get a surveyor and they survey this in and they say, we're asking for a variance, and this is specifically what the variance is.
Yeah.
And then I think it's all crystal clear. I don't.
Yeah. So
It's
they
the
get
reason-
that, but then they still have to apply for the building and occupancy permits, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
all of
And
that.
it just makes it way simpler in my mind, and it doesn't set a precedent. It's a variance for these people, and you don't need to have G on your,
Okay. Well, maybe that's where we're headed with this, and we do a motion that has a bit of a preamble saying that, where it says concern that this not be a precedent either island-wide or with regard to this particular property and building, we recommend that, I don't know, can we really recommend that the claimants change their application? I don't know.
The
well, who
recommendations-
encouraged them to go for rezoning? Did they want to go for rezoning, or did they think they had to go for rezoning? Like why are they steered down that path and not towards variance?
And again, some of this is it's like their legal advice that I don't necessarily feel it's my place to share, but ultimately it was their sort of advice based on like an application with amenity contribution to not go the variance route and instead propose that they instead apply to rezone.
Yeah. No, see that legal.
And we essentially had said we were comfortable in the original variance application having an amenity contribution as part of a variance, but if instead their preference was to apply for a rezoning because of the advice they had received.
Yeah, see that's
but we could do it as a rezoning instead of a variance.
And that begins to worry me a little bit that they are looking for a perpetual. I mean, we can't tell them to change their application, but I think we can say that it is our view that an application for a development permit variance fits with the current circumstances and the concern about precedent. And I would emphasize this precedence both island-wide and with regard to this particular property.
Right.
That would be our recommendation to council, and the applicant can pick out. I mean, we of course don't have access to their legal opinion, and maybe there's something in that.
Well, I think whether we have access to that or not, it seems crystal clear to me. There are 4 property lines to the property. The rezoning will apply to all property lines and to any secondary suite that's built.
Okay, well, maybe that's another thing. So we're concerned about precedents, and we're concerned that rezoning has unintended consequence of being wider than whatever the word.
Broader, I think it's too broad.
Broader than is required to accommodate this particular non-compliance.
It feels to me like it's seeking, having done something unlawful, they're seeking to rectify it, but they'll only rectify it if they can actually get something more out of it. But I'm reading something into it, which is
Well,
not,
I think so.
But let's not read into it.
No,
But I
that's
think,
not.
but I think, but I feel myself that it's, I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be a variance. And so I'm back to that.
I mean, the development variance, where I'm headed is I would like to help them out with this particular building, but only with this particular building.
Yeah, and
Right, so it's like,
I agree.
so the APC essentially is saying, like, if council wants to, like, if it is rezoning or variance, it's like you would want it to be just for this building and not, you're not reducing the setbacks for all buildings and structures, but reducing setbacks for the existing building.
Yeah. Okay, and that's a good way of saying it. It leaves it up to the claimant to decide how to do it. And it may well be if we have recommended and council approves the recommendation that it be just for this particular building, they may suddenly have lost whatever rationale they had for the rezoning and back away from it. I think that the development permit variance, it just strikes me as being more simple. You just get a survey and Daniel Martin signs it and we're done.
Well, council approves the variance, but
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I just think, that's, it's clear, and if they have some direct feedback from the applicants that says that, a variance is preferable to us, maybe they'll be fine with the variance. Like, you never know why these things happen, because everybody second guesses what council is going to tell them. And, but that's certainly my understanding of what happened.
It may be quite unintentional that the variance, they may not realize that the variance, the zoning variance gives them more than they're asking for. But it should be of concern to us.
The rezoning, you mean?
Yeah, the rezoning, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the variance approach. I can see a situation where rezoning is granted and then a building permit is granted, but construction does not proceed and the building is replaced with something else, within the zoning definition.
Yep. So how about that, Steph? Can you make that sound like English?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna tweak it offline, but I'll show you what I have. The many stories of the APC tonight. There's a few versions. So I originally had, can you see it?
Just says Steph Short has
Just
started.
warming up.
You started, but you didn't. It says you've started screen sharing. There we go.
Okay, so I had that you were sort of had concerns about the prematurity of the application, but were sort of satisfied with the path forward, which I identified, but you've changed that. And now we're at concern about being island-wide and setting a precedent, and concern that the proposal is broader and unintended consequences, and therefore recommend reapplying for a variance.
Okay.
The right direction?
I don't think we need the first sentence, but maybe,
That one?
yeah, I don't.
No, I think that's key,
No.
Kirsty, because that exactly is we have no idea how many non-compliant buildings there are. And so Daniel may just start getting emails saying, well, you did it for them, you got to do it for us. And that puts him and council in a very difficult position. So what I would like to say is, where there is concern that this application be dealt with without setting a precedent, just say without setting a precedent, we'll do it. Without setting an unfortunate precedent. How about?
Sure.
Very dramatic.
Okay.
And where there's also concern.
There's also concern. Can we not be honest and say, whereas the APC is concerned at this application?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. And you do that for the previous sentence as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. And then okay.
Maybe like because the
Now I have trouble with the actual motion.
Well, maybe we just recommend that, do we need to say that if there is a rezoning, and it is that we think that they should apply for a variance? And that they shouldn't even go for the rezoning? Or do we want to?
withdraw.
what I'm hearing from the APC members is that the rezoning approach is inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I think the recommendation should be about returning to an application for a variance.
Yeah, and I think we're not recommending that the applicants do anything. I think we have to be very careful there. What we're really recommending is that the municipality.
That council direct staff to encourage the applicants?
No, don't even say that. That council not approve a zoning, approve the rezoning. But,
But instead,
yeah.
focus on a
But he
variance.
said, why don't we just say consider, but instead consider a development appeal variance. We have to be very careful not to tell them exactly what to decide, but.
I guess it would be to like encourage the applicant
Well,
to
but
submit
instead,
a variance application.
Yeah.
well, why don't we
Have
say
you
both things?
reapply since they did apply in 2017?
So they applied for a variance in 2017 and somehow moved to rezoning. So we should go back to the variance, and then they can think that everyone's crazy. But that's fine.
No, why don't, yeah, and
You're just looking for excitement on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what you're up to.
and then, I mean, I don't know if we need to, I guess we have provided the rationale for this.
Do we want to say reapply for a development variance permit with specific limitations on siting and
Why don't we say
Nice.
specific to the existing buildings?
building and location.
Isn't
Yeah.
that what a variance permit is? Specific, it's just specific to that one building?
It doesn't
It may be,
have
but
to
I think
be,
we should be
but it
clear
almost
about it.
always is.
Yeah,
Because this is the specific, this is our concern, I think we should put it in words. So how's that reading? Therefore, be it resolved, the APC encourage the applicants to withdraw. English was my first degree.
I'll tweak it off, like I'll be putting in numbers and application
Right.
numbers and the whole committee name and everything.
Yeah, I think that works. Michael, what's your thought?
yeah, I would just put the word current before, not approve the current rezoning application. And, because that's. what
I'll
we're
do the
doing.
whole number, but
Right.
okay.
How
Do we like this?
this?
Turn that be. This- Can I say the non-compliance of this particular building?
Okay. I'm still a little concerned about council encouraging an applicant to do anything. Can we not say, council not approve the current rezoning application, but consider if the applicants reapply? We just say, but consider,
Councillor Hawking, you can be the authority on that.
I agree with where Michael's going.
Yeah, okay.
The council
Oops.
consider.
Sorry, I was thinking-
Application.
But consider, sorry, Michael.
an application for
Development variance permit.
development variance permit with limitations specific to the building and
Right.
location, if the applicants so
And so-
apply.
I
Right.
don't think you need to say that, Michael. I mean,
You know, I don't think you need to. I think that's implied.
Applicants have to apply. I mean, it's a
Okay.
non-compliant condition. There's
Okay.
no choice but to resolve this situation.
Okay. So, and you know, I don't know, Daniel, if you have the kind of relationship with these owners that you could sit down and talk to them about roadmaps and how the dominoes have to fall, and you know, and that's
Yeah.
what explains the decision, our advice, really. And you had a whole bunch of stuff on the previous page that I don't think we need, right, Steph?
Yeah, that was just me trying to keep up with you guys.
Oh, okay.
I was curious, Daniel, in this, where would the voluntary contribution change hands in this first reading? Building inspector says yes,
So
rezoning, building permit work, occupancy permit.
typically it's after third reading before adoption.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it can sit in a solicitor's trust account. It would be nice if it were actually sitting in a solicitor's trust account beforehand.
But there would be no contribution with a DPA, is that right?
Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. It's like when it initially came to council, that was part of the council discussion, was an amenity contribution as part of a variance, which is like much less common than a rezoning application.
But I think that it's fair to ask for it, like. And that's the, like, I don't know, is there illegality in getting a contribution for a variance permit?
Not like, I guess not according to our position. But
'Cause I-
it is much less common. Like if you look across municipalities, almost all municipalities take amenity contributions as part of a rezoning. It's fairly standard. Doing it as part of a variance permit is much more rare.
Well,
But this is an after the fact, like, that this is,
Right.
they were They were
Why
naughty.
Why tie it to the permit at all?
Yeah, I think we leave that up to council to decide. I mean, if we wanted to say anything, we could say that the APC is pleased to note the offer of an amenity contribution. Just leave it at that in the whereases.
Yeah, yeah, I think so, because I think that it will still be a deterrence to other people if they have to do an amenity contribution. Like, yeah, we want that.
Well, maybe we could even be stronger than.
So the province has a guideline on CACs. I think that needs to be reviewed by planning.
Yeah, I think our
There's a guideline document online.
yeah, I think our current CAO was part of the group that developed that when he worked for the province.
Well, do we? I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, how does it apply to variances? That's the question. Because I have never seen it in a variance context.
Yeah.
Only rezoning.
So is it?
Doesn't mean that it's not possible, but
Well, actually, but maybe take out the.
Can't any citizen make an amenity contribution to the municipality?
Well, it's by if it's voluntary, but maybe just take out the please. Why don't we just say, and whereas the APC notes the voluntary amenity contribution, or whatever the language is, just. And I'd do it as a whereas.
I just feel like this is a reason, and that's a reason, and that's the conclusion based on the reasons. And this is kind of different, but.
Well, what it shows is that they're
Okay.
that they're willing to do what needs to be done. It shows a kind of they're not just giving us the finger.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Whereas, what you could say, whereas the APC notes. Yeah, just say the notes of an offer of a voluntary amenity contribution. I don't know, really, it's a sort of a good faith thing, isn't it? The applicants are proceeding in good faith now. I don't know, I'm comfortable with it as it is now, but.
There could then read, whereas the APC notes that the offer of a voluntary amenity contribution, which demonstrates, what did you say was the word you used?
The good faith of.
Which demonstrates good faith.
And the applicant's intention to deal with this matter.
Good, Michael. Yeah.
Actually, maybe be more specific. The applicant's intention to obtain
Compliance.
Yeah.
Reach compliance?
Yeah,
Or
that's
achieve-
better. Yeah, reach compliance is better. Yeah. So that pretty much says, you know, if they take that voluntary amenity contribution off the table because of something like what Martin referred to, that it's not usual in other municipalities, then we'd be very unhappy.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm sure that there are ways that they can make a gift to the municipality, which would be separate and apart from their variance permit.
Now, I do remember David's comment about it's just first reading. I mean, council could go ahead and give first reading anyway, but then they may not get second reading, and while they're waiting for second reading, they've got this other way of dealing with it. I don't know.
I'm not sure that we should be overly concerned about the mechanics of this and the timing. This is when we received it.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, and you know
I
what?
mean, Daniel, I don't mean to burden you with that, but there's got to be a way to deal with it. Sorry, Michael.
I think it's important that we send the message to whatever council is sitting at the time the ultimate decision is made. So that's what this does.
Right.
Okay. Do you need someone to make that motion?
I think we need someone to make that motion. Do I have someone to move this motion?
Wouldn't it be funny if nobody wanted to, huh?
At the end.
Hilarious.
All right, Michael, do I hear that you'll make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
All right, do I have a seconder?
Sure, I'm okay.
Kirsty, all in favor?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, it's carried.
Yeah, I really wonder if we're going to see a lot more of these, but there's a lot of old buildings on awful close to the road.
Well, I
That
know
road
that
is really
I
a
know-
road going nowhere with
I know
trees
that
all around. They're
Greg
going to
is-
be causing fire anyway.
hand in hand with the pandemic, I know that Greg Cormier, the building inspector, has seen a whole lot more construction going on that has been without permits than he'd seen before.
Yeah, part of that, I think, not to get harsh about it, but we are hearing complaints about how long it takes to get a permit, and I'm quite
Oh, yeah.
prepared to think that it's often because the applicants don't have the materials together properly. But
Yeah,
in
and
any event.
I think that, there is the registered professional route. There is an opportunity, and I've discussed this with Greg before. The municipality, if they can't manage the workload, they can request applicants to retain a registered professional who will oversee the construction and provide, reports during the construction. It's a,
yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not excusing any of this. What do we call it? Outlaw construction.
right. Yeah, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. It's obviously from, after, so X number of years in university and an equal number of years, in training, and then sort of finally getting registered. And, we're governed by a code of ethics and bylaws that say, you can't cheat and lie. And so it kind of rubs me the wrong way when things are happening that they don't need to be happening that way.
I don't know. Daniel, do you get reports like that from neighbors? And
Some,
okay, no, it's
like,
really none of my business, but I'm just wondering, that's just strengthening my view that we've got to be careful about precedent here.
yeah, I mean, I guess I would say in general, it's like, since probably COVID, it's like our building activity has doubled. So I wouldn't be surprised if, unpermitted stuff doubled, but I don't think it's gone up like disproportionately more than.
No, I think it's always been around, and Cormier has only been here for 5 minutes, so he doesn't really know what happened before. He has, so.
I think nevertheless, I guess as a prudent professional, I get really concerned about the liability and, on all sides, including the municipality's liability.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of owners that don't really understand what they're getting themselves in for. They just think it's quicker and convenient and cheaper.
Sure.
And then they get knocked, and then, well, they find themselves in the position of these people.
Yeah, or, they can't get insurance, or they can't sell their home. It's kind of.
Yeah. With the registered professionals route, so municipalities are not allowed to require letters of assurance from professionals on Part 9 projects.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So municipalities hire, qualified professionals to act as assistant building inspectors. It's
right.
Specific to project. So that may be a path.
That's what I had in mind, that it would be something. Okay. Yeah. And I do know that the shoe is on the other foot with a larger building, if it's not part 9, that the construction team or the design team can actually bring a CRP into the team and say, we'd like to carry, go forward on this basis. And their letters of assurance, along with all the other consultants, would cover that off. And the building inspectors like that.
Mhm.
Because the liability all falls onto the design team. But anyway, that's a different conversation.
But
Yeah,
an
so
evening's work. Yeah.
yeah, indeed. Thank you all for your work tonight. Information items, we have the 2021 Island Plan on here. Is that
It's always on.
It's
always on?
it's always-
Oh,
Yeah, just so you guys don't forget about it, to align with council's strategic direction.
Okay.
All right.
For all,
Good thing I didn't read it then.
The other thing, there is the island survey. So council directed staff to complete the survey every 2 years in order to try to do year over year or 2 over 2 year comparisons. And as
Okay.
committee members, it's always good to have an idea of what people are saying and thinking.
Okay.
So
Well,
council's asking that you give it a
well,
lookie.
add a question. Do you live in an illegal building?
Probably.
And you win an iPad if you complete the
Your phone up, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. I took the survey and read the results. Not a lot changed, but something's good.
All right. So on that note, do we have a next meeting scheduled or no?
I usually just follow Daniel's lead on that. Do you have any referrals coming up, Daniel?
I feel like I have 2 reports going on Monday's council that have
Oh.
recommendations of referrals to the APC.
Okay, so maybe we should schedule one. I think Daniel and I are both confused about Thursday night for you guys. You usually Monday or
Yeah, no, Thursday night works for me. I'm no longer on the library board, which used to be, in fact, they're meeting right now without me somehow.
Thursday
So
works for-
Thursday nights are good.
next council meeting is the 14th, Daniel?
I thought he said there's one on Monday.
It's on Monday, and then the 14th is one after.
So you've got one report on Monday and one on the 14th?
No, I think I've got 2 on Monday. I think is my memory. I should know.
And including this one as well, so you've got 3.
Not including this one. I have 2 others that are on the agenda on Monday. That like a
Daniel,
detached secondary suite, and then the Arbutus Ridge rezoning. I think now it's like not guaranteed council proceeds with them or refers them, but
Why
If
don't
we
we
look-
set ourselves up after the 14th then?
yeah.
And then there's 2 meetings that
Yeah.
might,
Or ultimately, you can wait and see what happens at the meeting and then do a poll.
Fine.
fine with me. Whatever's easier for you, Steph.
how's Thursday, February 24th?
I'm out. I have a presentation to another council that night.
How about 5 o'clock on Tuesday, the 22nd?
I'm away.
Yeah, I'm actually away as well.
Sounds to me like you need to do a poll.
We'll do a poll.
Sorry.
Sorry, Steph.
That particular week is quite full.
Okay, see you at the poll.
Okay,
I've
thanks.
got a few Jackson Pollocks out there right now that are second try, third try polls. So
Oh dear.
yeah. Anyway, so you
We're
guys
much-
won't disappoint.
We're much easier to get along with.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Michael, great, thank you. Thank you all. Good to see you all.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanks so much.
Good